11 p.m. The doorbell rang. My husband's daughter walked in with her husband dragging 2 huge suitcases. Dad said we're moving in. Before I could speak, she shoved a list into my hand. Breakfast at 6 a.m., no greasy food, fresh sheets every week, clean the bathroom every night, hand wash our work clothes, iron them, hang them, never fold them. I looked at my husband. He said nothing. I smiled. Okay. At exactly 6 a.m. the next morning, breakfast was on the table. Not almost ready. Not warming in the pan. Ready. 2 plates of egg whites sat beside sliced strawberries and dry wheat toast, with coffee poured into the mugs I normally saved for holidays. The kitchen counters were wiped down, the sink was empty, and the guest bathroom smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Upstairs, the bed in the guest room had fresh sheets tucked tight enough to bounce a quarter, the way my mother used to make beds before company came over for Thanksgiving. I stood by the stove in my robe, holding my own cup of coffee, and listened to the house wake up. For 18 years, that house had been quiet in the mornings. Mark used to come downstairs first, rubbing sleep from his eyes, asking where his reading glasses were, even though they were usually sitting on top of his head. I would laugh. He would kiss my cheek, and we would have 10 peaceful minutes before the world started making demands. That was our rhythm, or at least that was what I had believed. Then his daughter came down the stairs. Ashley Collins was 28 years old, beautiful in a polished, expensive way, with straight blonde hair, perfect nails, and the kind of confidence that made every room feel like it belonged to her. Her husband, Tyler, followed behind her in sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, yawning like he had spent the night in a hotel he planned to complain about later. Ashley stopped at the bottom of the stairs when she saw the table. For 1 second, she looked surprised. Then she smiled. Not a warm smile, not gratitude. Victory. Well, she said, glancing at Tyler. See, I told you she'd understand. Tyler gave a sleepy laugh and pulled out a chair. Smells good. I set a small glass bowl of fruit beside Ashley's plate. No greasy food, I said gently. Ashley looked at me, trying to decide if there was sarcasm hidden in my voice. There wasn't. I had spent most of my adult life learning that calm, unsettled people more than anger ever could. Mark came down last. He was still buttoning his shirt, his gray hair damp from the shower, and when he saw Ashley sitting at our table, eating the breakfast she had demanded, a visible relief passed across his face. He had expected a fight. He had expected tears, maybe a slammed cabinet, maybe me asking why his daughter and son-in-law had shown up at our door with luggage and a household commandment list as if I were staff. Instead, he saw order. He saw me making peace. That was what he wanted to see, so that was what he saw. Morning, he said carefully. Morning, I replied. Ashley picked up her fork. The eggs are good. A little plain, but that's fine. I'm trying to eat clean again. I remember, I said. It was on the list. Her eyes flicked toward me again, but I only smiled and turned back to the sink. The list was no longer on the counter where she had left it the night before. At 5:12 that morning, while the whole house slept, I had taken a photo of it with my phone, placed the original inside a folder, and slid that folder into the bottom drawer of my desk. I did not know yet exactly how far this would go, but I knew enough to preserve what people handed me when they thought I was too weak to use it. The night before had told me everything I needed to know. Ashley had not asked to stay. Tyler had not apologized for the hour. Mark had not stepped between us. He had stood beside the hallway table, one hand on his hip, refusing to meet my eyes while his daughter announced a decision he had made without me. When I looked at him, I was not asking whether the words were true. I was asking whether he understood what they meant. He did. That was why he stayed silent. After breakfast, Ashley pushed her chair back and looked around the kitchen with satisfaction. We'll probably need space in the pantry. Tyler likes protein bars, and I have a few supplements coming. Of course, Mark said too quickly. I wiped a spot from the counter that did not need wiping. Ashley continued, and we'll need the left side of the garage. Tyler has equipment. I turned slightly. Equipment? Tyler swallowed his coffee. Just some stuff from work. Tools, boxes, a bike, nothing crazy. Ashley waved a hand. Dad said there'd be room. There it was again. Dad said. 2 words that turned my home into a property Mark could distribute like extra office supplies. I looked at my husband. He lifted his coffee mug, avoiding my face. Ashley smiled as if the matter had been settled long before I entered the conversation. And maybe it had been. I had met Ashley when she was 10, 2 years after her mother left Mark and moved to Arizona with a man who sold boats for a living. Ashley had visited us every other weekend at first, then less often during high school, then mostly on holidays after college. I had bought her winter coats, remembered her favorite birthday cakes, mailed care packages during finals week, and sat through entire school concerts where she played 3 notes on the clarinet and looked miserable doing it. I had never asked her to call me Mom. I had never competed with the woman who gave birth to her. I had simply tried to be steady. But steadiness can be mistaken for permission by people who only respect force. By 7:30, Mark had left for the office, Tyler had taken a long shower in the bathroom I had cleaned, and Ashley was upstairs organizing, which apparently meant opening closets and deciding which shelves should belong to her. I stood alone in the kitchen, watching sunlight spread across the hardwood floor my father had refinished with his own hands before he died. That floor was older than my marriage. So was the house. My parents had bought it in 1979, back when the neighborhood was mostly young families, station wagons, and maple trees planted too close to the sidewalks. I inherited it before I married Mark, and years later, after my mother's long illness, the house had been placed inside a family trust. Mark knew that. At least he had been told. He had signed documents acknowledging it once, in a lawyer's office with stale coffee and beige walls. But people remember what benefits them. By noon, Ashley came downstairs holding a stack of towels. "These are old," she said. "They're clean." She frowned. "I prefer white towels." I looked at the blue towels in her hands. Towels my mother had bought on sale at Macy's years ago, and something inside me went very still. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. Ashley seemed pleased, as if she had trained me with one sentence. That afternoon, I drove to the grocery store, bought exactly what was needed for the next morning's breakfast, and paid with my own card. On the way home, I sat in the parking lot for a moment with the engine off, watching people move through ordinary errands. A man loaded paper towels into his trunk. An older woman checked eggs before putting them in her cart. A teenage cashier stepped outside for a quick break and tilted her face toward the sun. Life continued even when your marriage shifted under your feet. When I got home, Ashley was in the living room, feet tucked under her on my sofa, speaking into her phone. "Yeah, we're at Dad's house now," she said. "It's just easier, he has plenty of room." Dad's house. I walked past her without correcting it. Not because she was right. Because I wanted to hear how many times she would say it before the truth arrived. That evening, Mark asked me if I was upset. He asked while standing in the doorway of our bedroom, loosening his tie, with the cautious expression of a man who hoped the answer would be convenient. I folded my robe over the chair. "Should I be?" He sighed. "Rachel, come on. Ashley and Tyler hit a rough patch. It's family. Family calls before showing up at 11 at night." They were embarrassed. She didn't look embarrassed. His jaw tightened. "She's my daughter. And I'm your wife." For the first time that day, he looked directly at me. Then he looked away. That small movement did more damage than shouting ever could have. I nodded once, slowly, because some answers do not need words. The next morning, I set my alarm for 5:15 again. I made breakfast at 6. I cleaned the bathroom. I washed what was left in the hamper, though I separated my clothes from theirs. I followed the list exactly, not because I had accepted my place, but because I had finally understood theirs. They thought kindness meant weakness. They thought silence meant surrender. And Mark, my husband of 18 years, had made the worst mistake of all. He had given away authority he never had. By the end of the first week, Ashley had started referring to the guest room as our room, the hallway closet as our storage, and the kitchen as Dad's kitchen. Tyler parked in my spot twice and moved only after I stood in the driveway long enough for him to notice me through the window. I did not yell. I did not cry. I documented. Every demand, every comment, every assumption. Every time Ashley said, "Dad said." Because one day soon, I knew those words would matter. And when they did, I wanted everyone to remember exactly who had said what. By the second Monday, Ashley had begun treating the house like a resort, where the staff had been slow to adjust to her standards. She came downstairs that morning in a matching workout set, her hair pulled into a high ponytail, and set a ceramic travel mug beside the coffee maker as if placing an order at a counter. "Can you make mine with almond milk today? Tyler's stomach has been weird with regular milk." I was standing at the sink rinsing blueberries for breakfast. The sun had barely climbed over the maple tree in the front yard, and the neighborhood was still quiet except for a garbage truck groaning its way down the street. For years, Monday mornings in that house had belonged to me. I would open the back door for fresh air, listen to the local news on low volume, and drink coffee before Mark came down with his tie crooked. Now Ashley was opening cabinets without asking. "I don't have almond milk," I said. She turned, annoyed. "I put it on the grocery list yesterday." "The list on the counter?" "Yes." "I didn't write that list." Her face tightened for half a second, and then she smiled, thin and sharp. "Right. I just thought since you were going to the store anyway." "I bought groceries for the house," I said, placing the blueberries into a bowl. "Not specialty items I wasn't asked about directly." Tyler shuffled in behind her, scratching his jaw. "Regular coffee's fine." Ashley gave him a look. "That's not the point." No, I thought, it never was. The point was whether I would obey before being asked, whether I would anticipate her preferences, whether I would slowly begin shaping my days around her comfort until she no longer had to pretend she was a guest. That was how entitlement settled into a home, not all at once, inch by inch, shelf by shelf, mug by mug. Mark came downstairs a few minutes later, kissed Ashley on top of the head, and reached past me for coffee. He did not kiss me. He had stopped doing that sometime after the suitcases arrived, though I was not sure he had noticed. "Big week," he said, trying to sound cheerful. "Let's all just keep things smooth, okay?" Ashley nodded as if he had addressed me. I set breakfast on the table. Egg whites again, toast, fruit, coffee, no greasy food, exactly as requested. Ashley sat and looked at the plate. "Could we do oatmeal tomorrow? Steel cut, not instant." "I'll keep that in mind." She smiled, satisfied, and Mark looked relieved. Relief had become his favorite emotion around me. As long as I did not force him to choose, he could pretend he had not already chosen. After they left the kitchen, I carried my coffee to the small office off the dining room, closed the door, and opened my laptop. The room had once been my father's den. His old oak desk still sat under the window, heavy and scratched, with one drawer that stuck in damp weather. I had kept it because it reminded me of him. Mark had always called it too bulky, and Ashley had already suggested that Tyler could use the office for his gear. I logged into my bank account and began separating what should have been separated long ago. First, I moved my direct deposit to an individual checking account I had opened years earlier and rarely used. Then I changed the automatic payments connected to my personal credit card, my car insurance, my cell phone, and the trust's property expenses. I did not touch anything illegal. I did not hide money that belonged to Mark. I simply stopped letting my earnings float through the same pond where everyone had started fishing without permission. After that, I emailed my CPA, then the attorney who had handled my mother's estate, then the trust office downtown. I kept the messages short. There are uninvited long-term occupants in the property. My husband authorized them without my consent. I need to understand my legal options before this becomes a residency issue. I read it 3 times before sending. Then I sent it. My hands did not shake until afterward. That surprised me. People think strength feels like anger, but it often feels like grief with a calendar attached. You make phone calls. You gather documents. You put one foot in front of the other while something inside you quietly breaks. At lunch, Ashley appeared in the office doorway without knocking. "What are you doing?" "Work." She leaned against the frame. "From home?" "Some days." "Oh, I thought you mostly handled house stuff." I looked up at her. "Did Mark tell you that?" She shrugged. "Dad said you had a flexible schedule." Flexible. That was a word people loved using when they meant available. "I do consulting," I said. "I also manage the trust." Ashley blinked. "What trust?" I held her gaze for a moment, then closed my laptop. "Nothing you need to worry about." She stared as if she could sense a door had closed, even if she did not know which one. Then she gave a little laugh. "Well, Tyler needs somewhere to take calls in the afternoon, so maybe you could work upstairs or at the kitchen table." "No." The word landed softly, but it landed. Ashley's expression shifted. She was not used to hearing it from me. "No?" she repeated. "This office is mine." She pushed away from the doorframe. "It's Dad's house, Rachel." There it was again, polished and confident. I smiled. "Is it?" For a second, she had no answer. Then she rolled her eyes, walked away, and called upstairs. "Tyler, we'll figure something else out." That night, Mark confronted me in the laundry room while I was pulling shirts from the washer. His shirts, Tyler's shirts, Ashley's delicate blouses that came with instructions longer than a prescription label. I had washed them exactly as the list demanded, hand-washed, rinsed, pressed between towels, hung to dry, never folded. "Did you tell Ashley she couldn't use the office?" he asked. "I told her Tyler couldn't." His face tightened. "Rachel, they're under a lot of pressure." "So am I." "They lost their apartment." I paused with one of his shirts in my hands. "They lost it or they gave it up because they knew you'd let them move in here?" He did not answer fast enough. That was when I understood. I lowered the shirt slowly. "How long did you know?" Mark rubbed his forehead. "A few weeks." "A few weeks." They were behind, okay? Their lease was ending, Tyler's hours got cut, Ashley was embarrassed, and I didn't want you to make her feel worse. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the cruelty of that sentence had arrived dressed as concern. "You didn't want me to make her feel worse?" I said. "So you let her arrive at 11 o'clock at night and hand me a chore list in my own foyer." He looked away, again. "I thought if you saw they needed help, you'd understand." "You didn't ask me to help, you volunteered me." His mouth opened, then closed. In the old days, I might have filled the silence for him. I might have softened the sentence, offered a bridge, given him somewhere comfortable to stand. Women are often trained to protect everyone from the truth, even the people hurting them. I was done doing that. The following days settled into a strange performance. I made breakfast at 6. I cleaned what the list required. I ironed shirts and hung them with careful spacing in the guest room closet. Ashley grew more comfortable, more careless. She ordered packages every afternoon and left the boxes by the front door. Tyler took calls in the living room with his laptop balanced on my grandmother's coffee table. Mark came home later and later, grateful for any evening that did not require him to face the mess he had made. Meanwhile, I collected information. The trust attorney replied by Thursday. Her name was Elaine Porter, and she had known my mother before she knew me. Her email was calm, professional, and devastating. "The property remains trust-owned. Your husband has no ownership interest. Unauthorized long-term occupants should not be allowed to establish residency without written agreement. Document everything. Do not accept rent until we speak." I read that email 3 times. Then I printed it and placed it in the folder with Ashley's list. On Friday evening, Ashley invited 2 friends over without asking. They drank sparkling wine in the kitchen and laughed too loudly while Tyler grilled chicken on the back patio. When I walked in to get a glass of water, Ashley lifted her phone and said, "We're just celebrating finally having a stable place again." One of her friends smiled at me. "This house is gorgeous." Ashley said it's her dad's. I looked at Ashley. Ashley looked back, daring me to correct her. I took my water from the dispenser, calm as Sunday morning, and said, "It's been in my family for a long time." The friend's smile faded slightly. Ashley's jaw tightened. Before she could respond, Mark stepped in from the patio and said, "Rachel, can we not?" 3 small words. Can we not? Not Ashley, be respectful. Not this is Rachel's home too. Not even let's talk later. Just a public request for me to swallow the truth so his daughter would not be embarrassed by her lie. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat in my father's office and called Elaine's voicemail. "It's Rachel," I said quietly. "I'm ready to schedule a meeting. I want to do this legally, cleanly, and without cruelty, but I want them out before they forget they were never invited by the person who actually had the right to invite them." Then I hung up, placed the phone on the desk, and looked out at the dark yard where my father had once planted tomatoes every summer. For the first time since the suitcases arrived, I felt something besides betrayal. I felt prepared. Elaine Porter's office was on the 4th floor of a brick building downtown, 2 blocks from the county courthouse and across the street from a diner where my father used to take me for pancakes after dentist appointments. The building smelled faintly of old paper and floor polish, and the elevator made the same tired humming sound it had probably made since the 1980s. I arrived 10 minutes early because my mother had raised me to believe that being late was a kind of disrespect. And I sat in the waiting room with my purse on my lap, staring at a framed watercolor of the courthouse clock tower. Elaine came out herself instead of sending an assistant. She was in her early 60s, silver-haired, neat and sharp-eyed, with the calm expression of a woman who had spent decades watching families discover what money and property could reveal about them. She took both my hands in hers and said, "Rachel, I'm sorry you're dealing with this." That nearly undid me. Not Mark's silence, not Ashley's list, not Tyler parking in my driveway like he had won a prize. Kindness. I swallowed hard and nodded. "I should have called sooner." "You called when you were ready," Elaine said. Inside her office, she spread the documents across the table with the careful patience of someone laying out a map. There was the original deed from my parents' purchase of the house, the transfer into my name after my father died, the trust documents created during my mother's illness, and the acknowledgement Mark had signed 12 years earlier when the trust was updated. His signature sat on the last page in blue ink, slightly slanted, familiar enough to make my chest hurt. "He knew," I said quietly. Elaine looked over her glasses. "He was informed. Whether he absorbed it is another matter." "That sounds generous." "It is legally safer to be precise." I almost smiled. "My mother liked you." "Your mother liked facts." I looked down at the papers. My mother had liked facts and clean windows and black coffee and never letting people confuse politeness with permission. She had also liked Mark once. She had believed he was steady. Maybe he had been for a while. People do not always reveal themselves all at once. Sometimes they wait until comfort makes them careless. Elaine folded her hands. "Ashley and Tyler were allowed into the property by your husband, but your husband does not have legal authority to grant them open-ended occupancy. However, because they are physically there and have brought belongings, we need to be careful. You do not change locks. You do not remove their belongings. You do not threaten them. We document, we give written notice, and we create a clear record." "I don't want to be cruel," I said. "I know. But I want my house back." Elaine nodded. "That is not cruelty." On the drive home, I passed a school bus, unloading children in front of a row of ranch houses, a man mowing his lawn in cargo shorts, and two women walking small dogs under the bright yellow leaves of early fall. Ordinary life had a strange way of looking almost offensive when your own life was rearranging itself. The world did not pause for betrayal. It kept selling coffee, delivering mail, and changing traffic lights. When I pulled into the driveway, Tyler's bike was leaning against the garage door, blocking my side. Again. I sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, and looked at it. Then I took a photo. By then, I had learned that documentation was a language of its own. It was quiet. It did not make threats. It did not slam doors. It simply waited for the day someone powerful enough to matter asked, "Can you prove that?" Yes. I could. Inside, Ashley was standing in the kitchen with a tape measure, talking on speakerphone. "No, I think a sectional would fit if we move that old cabinet," she said. "The whole room is kind of dated, but we can work with it." The old cabinet was my mother's hutch. I set my keys in the bowl by the door. "What are you measuring?" Ashley ended the call without apology. "The living room. Tyler's mom has a sectional in storage, and she said we could use it." "We don't need a sectional." Ashley laughed lightly. "Rachel, no offense, but this setup worked when it was just you and Dad. Now there are 4 adults here." "No," I said. "There are 2 adults who live here and 2 adults who are guests." The room went very still. Ashley lowered the tape measure. "Guests?" "Yes." Her eyes narrowed. "Dad said we could stay as long as we needed." "Dad did not have the right to say that." She gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "Are you serious right now?" "Very." She stepped closer, her voice dropping into the tone people use when they think volume is the only thing separating them from authority. "This is my father's house." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw something underneath the arrogance. Fear. Not guilt. Not yet. Fear dressed up as entitlement because entitlement was easier to wear in public. "Ashley," I said calmly, "you should ask your father to show you the deed." Her face changed. "Not much, just enough." Then she scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "Maybe." I walked past her into the office and closed the door. That evening, Mark came home angry, which told me Ashley had called him before his car reached the driveway. He found me in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner because, despite everything, people still needed to eat, and I still preferred soup from scratch when the weather turned cool. "What did you say to Ashley?" he demanded. I kept chopping carrots. Many things over the years. Which one upset her today? "Don't do that." I set the knife down. "I told her she was a guest." "She's my daughter." "She is not a homeowner." Mark's face flushed. "You're really going to make this about paperwork?" "No, Mark, you made this about paperwork when you gave someone permission to move into a house you don't own." The words landed between us like broken glass. For a second, he looked stunned, then angry, then something close to ashamed, though it passed quickly. "I've lived here 18 years, he said. "Yes." "I've paid bills here." "Yes." "I helped replace the furnace. I paid for half the roof." "You contributed to marital expenses in a home where you lived." His mouth tightened. "You sound like a lawyer." "I saw one today." That silenced him. From the hallway, I heard Ashley's door open upstairs. Of course she was listening. Tyler, too, probably. Houses carry sound, especially when everyone inside is waiting for a fight. Mark lowered his voice. "Rachel, don't escalate this." I almost laughed. They showed up at 11 at night with suitcases and a chore list. They needed help. And I needed a husband. He flinched then, not enough to apologize, but enough to show he had heard me. The next morning, I did exactly what I had done every morning since Ashley arrived. I woke at 5:15, made breakfast, wiped the counters, checked the bathroom, and folded my own towel over the rack in the neat way my mother had taught me. I did not hand-wash Ashley's clothes that day, because there were none in the hamper by 6 a.m., and the list had not said I had to search bedrooms for laundry. Ashley came down late, irritated. "Where's my white blouse?" "I don't know. I left it on the chair." "Your list said hand-wash work clothes. It didn't say collect them from bedrooms." Tyler snorted into his coffee before he could stop himself. Ashley turned on him so fast he looked down at his plate. Mark rubbed his temples. "Can we please not start the morning like this?" I placed a folder on the dining table. Not the legal one, not yet. This folder was simple, neat, and printed on plain white paper. I had prepared it after my meeting with Elaine, and I had waited until everyone was at the same table because some truths should not be whispered in hallways. Ashley stared at it. "What's that?" I sat down across from her. "Since we are sharing the house, these are the homeowner's rules." Mark went still. Ashley laughed. "Excuse me?" I opened the folder and slid 3 copies across the table. A temporary occupancy agreement. It outlines rent, utilities, food contributions, guest restrictions, parking, liability, cleaning expectations, property damage responsibility, and a 30-day limit, unless renewed in writing. Tyler reached for a copy, but Ashley slapped her hand over it. "We're not signing anything." "That's your choice." "This is insane," she said. "You're trying to charge us rent to live in Dad's house?" I looked at Mark. He said nothing. Again. Only this time his silence did not protect him. It condemned him. Ashley shoved the papers back toward me. "No." Then, with a small, theatrical smile, she tore the top sheet in half. The sound was soft, almost delicate. Mark whispered, "Ashley." But he did not stop her. I gathered the torn pieces, placed them back in the folder, and stood. "Thank you," I said. Ashley blinked. "For what?" "For making your position clear." I walked into my father's office, scanned the torn pages, attached the file to an email, and sent it to Elaine. Subject line: refusal to sign. For the first time in days, my hands were perfectly steady. The first formal notice arrived by certified mail on a Wednesday afternoon, and Ashley treated it like junk. I knew because I was in the kitchen when the mail carrier rang the bell, and I watched through the front window as Tyler signed for the envelope in pajama pants and socks. He turned it over once, saw the law firm's name in the corner, and carried it upstairs like a man delivering bad weather to someone else. 5 minutes later, Ashley came down holding the envelope between 2 fingers. "What is this?" she asked. I was washing lettuce at the sink, cold water running over my hands. "It looks like mail." "Don't be cute." "I'm not." She slapped the envelope on the counter. "You had a lawyer send us a notice?" "I had my lawyer communicate in writing." "For what?" For the same reason I gave you an occupancy agreement. Clarity. Ashley's face went pink. We're not tenants. No, I said, turning off the faucet. You're unauthorized occupants who refused to sign a temporary agreement. Her mouth opened, then closed, as if the phrase itself offended her. People like Ashley loved the comfort of adult privileges, but the moment adult consequences arrived, they acted as though language had become abusive. Mark came home early that day. That alone told me she had called him. He walked in wearing his navy suit and that tired expression he used whenever he wanted me to make a hard thing easier for him. I was in the laundry room, removing my own clothes from the dryer. Only mine. Ashley had started leaving her blouses in a silk pile on the guest room chair again, and I had stopped rescuing them. We need to talk, he said. I folded a sweater over my arm. Then talk. He looked toward the hallway. Privately. This concerns everyone. His jaw tightened. Rachel. I put the sweater in the basket and faced him. You want privacy now? That stopped him. For a moment, I saw the old Mark under the defensiveness, the man who used to bring me gas station coffee on long road trips and knew I liked the cheap powdered creamer more than the fancy kind. I had loved that man. I had built a life with that man. But love does not erase the record. It only makes reading it hurt more. He lowered his voice. You're scaring Ashley. She should be worried. She's family. She is an adult woman who moved into my home without permission and handed me a housekeeping list. She didn't mean it like that. I let out a breath. Mark, she meant every word, and you let her. From upstairs came the faint sound of a drawer closing too hard. Ashley was listening again. Mark stepped closer. Can't you just give them time? I offered 30 days with written rules. They don't have money for rent. Then they should have asked for help, not command. He rubbed his forehead. Tyler's hours were cut. Ashley's trying to find something better. They're embarrassed. Then why do they have enough pride to give orders but not enough humility to apologize? He had no answer, because the answer would have required him to admit that he had raised his daughter to believe my kindness was a family resource. Over the next week, the house became colder without the weather changing. Ashley no longer smiled at breakfast. Tyler stopped making eye contact. Mark slept on the far side of the bed, facing the wall, as though distance could excuse silence. I continued moving through my mornings with the same quiet precision I had always had, but something essential had shifted. I was no longer maintaining a marriage, I was maintaining evidence. Elaine told me to document refusals, disturbances, property interference, and any attempt to claim ownership. So I did. When Ashley left 3 bags of trash in the garage because Dad said pickup was Monday, I took a picture. When Tyler blocked my car again, I took a picture. When Ashley's friend came over and stayed until nearly midnight on a weeknight, laughing loudly on the patio while Mark pretended to watch television, I wrote down the time. I did not do it to punish them. I did it because fairness requires memory. Without records, the loudest person often becomes the believed person. By the 3rd week, money began doing what truth had not yet done. It applied pressure. Mark had always been generous when generosity cost him nothing. He liked paying for dinners, slipping Ashley extra cash on birthdays, fixing things before anyone asked, and calling it love. But once I separated my paycheck and stopped covering groceries for 4 adults, the numbers changed quickly. He was buying protein bars, almond milk, cleaning supplies Ashley preferred, extra coffee, extra utilities, extra gas for Tyler's borrowed commute, and still paying his own credit cards from choices he had made before the suitcases arrived. One evening, I heard Ashley and Mark arguing in the kitchen. I thought you said this would be temporary, Mark said. It is temporary, Ashley snapped, but we can't move until Tyler's schedule stabilizes. You said that 2 weeks ago, and you said Rachel would be fine with it. There it was, the first crack. Tyler muttered, Maybe we should look at cheaper places. Ashley turned on him. With what money, Tyler? I stayed in the hallway, holding a basket of towels, and listened long enough to understand that the alliance was weakening. Not because anyone had grown kinder, because comfort had become expensive. The second notice arrived the following Monday. This one Ashley opened in the dining room in front of Mark and Tyler. I was setting down soup bowls for dinner, a habit I had not yet abandoned because feeding people was not the same as surrendering to them. There was chicken noodle soup, warm bread, and a green salad no one appreciated. Ashley read the notice, then laughed too loudly. This is harassment. Tyler leaned toward her. What does it say? It says we have to vacate. Mark looked at me. Rachel? I sat across from him. You were all notified properly. You can't kick my daughter out before Thanksgiving. It is early October. She needs stability. So do I. Ashley dropped the letter on the table. I'm not leaving. I looked at her for a long moment. Then the court will decide. She smiled, but there was fear underneath it now, plain as daylight through thin curtains. Dad owns this house. Mark did not correct her. He did not confirm it either. He just stared at his soup. That was the first time I saw Ashley look uncertainly at her father. Not angry, not smug, uncertain, as if she had been standing on a bridge and had suddenly heard wood crack beneath her feet. The next morning, the county clerk's office accepted the filing. Elaine emailed me the confirmation at 10:17 a.m., while Ashley was upstairs complaining on the phone and Tyler was in the driveway trying to jumpstart his car. I read the message in my father's office with both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. The legal process had begun. There was no satisfaction in that moment. Not yet. Just a deep, heavy sadness that this was what it had taken to be heard. That night, Mark stood in the office doorway. He looked older than he had 3 weeks ago. Why are you doing this? He asked. I could have given him a legal answer. I could have talked about liability, occupancy, trust assets, boundaries, disrespect, documents, notices, and every warning he had ignored. But the truth was simpler. I looked around the room my father had loved, at the desk he had left me, at the window my mother had cleaned every spring, at the walls that had held birthdays, funerals, Christmas mornings, quiet dinners, and 18 years of a marriage I had tried to honor. Then I looked back at my husband. I'm protecting what's mine, I said. He swallowed. From Ashley? No, Mark. His eyes met mine. From you? The hearing was scheduled for the first Tuesday in November. Elaine had warned me not to expect a dramatic courtroom scene. Housing matters are usually straightforward, she had said. The excitement only exists in television shows. She was right. Real life was quieter. Real life was paperwork, calendars, signatures, and people discovering that assumptions were not evidence. During the 2 weeks leading up to the hearing, the atmosphere inside the house deteriorated in ways I never could have imagined. Ashley stopped speaking to me unless she absolutely had to. Tyler spent more time outside than inside, sitting in his truck with the engine off, scrolling through job listings or staring through the windshield. More than once I caught him looking exhausted, like a man who had slowly realized he had followed someone else's confidence into a situation he no longer understood. Mark tried to play peacemaker. That had become his favorite role. Not husband. Not father. Peacemaker. The problem was that peace built on dishonesty eventually collapses under its own weight. One Saturday morning, he found me trimming the rose bushes my mother had planted 20 years earlier. Can we talk? I kept clipping dead branches. We've talked. No, really talk. I looked up. His shoulders sagged. I've made mistakes. I waited. I shouldn't have let Ashley come over without asking you. No. I shouldn't have let her hand you that list. No. I shouldn't have stayed quiet. Finally. There it was. The truth. Not the whole truth, but enough of it to matter. He rubbed the back of his neck. I thought you'd calm down after a few days. I did. He frowned. No, I corrected gently. I became clear. That sentence seemed to confuse him more than any argument ever had. People often mistake calm for forgiveness. They are not the same thing. The following Monday, Tyler knocked on my office door. Actually knocked. It was the first time either of them had done that. Do you have a minute? Of course. He stepped inside awkwardly, leaving the door open behind him. I wanted to apologize. I remained silent. I shouldn't have let Ashley treat you the way she did. No. I shouldn't have parked in your spot. No. I shouldn't have assumed. He looked around the office. That this was ours. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. I believed what Ashley believed. And what was that? That if Mark said yes... He stopped. Then that was enough. I nodded. It wasn't. No. He swallowed. I know that now. For the first time since all of this began, I felt genuine sympathy. Not because Tyler was innocent. He wasn't. He had enjoyed the convenience. He had benefited from the arrangement. But unlike Ashley, he was capable of recognizing his mistake. "Have you found work?" I asked. "A better position starts next month." "Congratulations." He smiled weakly. "I wish it had happened sooner." "So do I." He stood. "I don't know what's going to happen Tuesday." "I do." He looked surprised. "It's going to follow the law." He nodded slowly. Then he quietly left. That evening, Ashley exploded. She had apparently learned Tyler had spoken to me. "You apologized to her?" Tyler didn't answer. "You actually apologized?" "I owed her one." Ashley slammed a cabinet so hard a serving bowl rattled. "You are unbelievable." "No," Tyler replied quietly. "I was unbelievable 3 weeks ago." Mark watched from the dining room without saying a word. Again. Ashley turned toward her father. "Say something." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. She stared at him. "Dad?" He looked exhausted. "Ash?" "No." She folded her arms. "You told us this was your house." "It is." He stopped himself. "It isn't?" Silence. For the first time since moving in, Ashley looked frightened. Real fear. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Fear. She turned back toward Tyler. "He's lying." Tyler didn't answer. She looked at me. "You're lying." I simply stood there. "You forged something." "No. My dad owns this house." I said nothing. She laughed. A short, nervous laugh. "This is ridiculous." Then she walked upstairs and slammed the bedroom door. The house shook. Not from the force of the slam. From the illusion finally beginning to collapse. Tuesday morning arrived cold and gray. Elaine met me outside the courthouse. She carried 2 neat binders. One blue, one black. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be." Inside, everything moved with surprising efficiency. Cases were called. People stepped forward. Lawyers spoke quietly. Judges asked practical questions. Nobody yelled. Nobody pounded tables. Real courts don't need drama. Facts create enough of their own. When our case was called, Ashley walked confidently beside Mark. Tyler followed several steps behind. The judge greeted everyone politely. Elaine introduced herself. Then Ashley spoke before anyone asked her to. "We live with my father." The judge nodded. "And who owns the property?" "My father." The judge made a note. Elaine didn't interrupt. She simply waited. Patience, I had learned, is often the strongest form of confidence. The judge turned toward Mark. "Sir, do you agree with your daughter's statement?" Mark hesitated. "Too long." I... Ashley looked at him. "Dad, He looked toward me, then toward Elaine, then back to the judge. "I've lived there for 18 years. That wasn't my question. The courtroom became perfectly still. "Do you own the property?" Mark swallowed. Elaine quietly slid the blue binder toward the clerk. "Your Honor, may I?" The judge nodded. Inside were the trust documents. The original deed. The transfer. The recorded filings. The trust amendments. Tax records. Insurance records. Everything. Neatly tabbed. Chronological. Impossible to misunderstand. The judge reviewed the first pages carefully. Then another. Then another. Ashley kept smiling. She still believed there had to be another page somewhere with Mark's name waiting to appear. There wasn't. Finally, the judge looked up. "Mr. Collins," Mark closed his eyes for a second. Can you produce any document showing ownership?" Silence. The longest silence of the entire hearing. Ashley slowly turned toward her father. "Dad?" He couldn't look at her. Not anymore. For the first time since she had marched through my front door declaring, "Dad said we're moving in," she realized there was one question she had never asked. Did he actually have the right to say that? The answer was about to change everything. The judge did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He looked at Mark over the top of the documents and asked again, slowly, Can you produce any document showing ownership of the property? Mark's hands were folded in front of him, but his knuckles had gone pale. Ashley stared at him as if she could force an answer into existence by sheer disbelief. Tyler stood a few feet behind her, jaw tight, eyes lowered, already understanding what she refused to accept. "No," Mark said at last. One word. Quiet. Final. Ashley's face changed in stages. First confusion, then anger, then panic. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Mark closed his eyes. "Ashley." "No, you said it was your house." "I said we lived there." "No," she snapped, loud enough that the judge looked up sharply. "You said it was your house." Elaine stood beside me, calm as stone. I did not look at Ashley. I looked at Mark, because this had always been about him. Ashley had been rude, entitled, and cruel, but she had walked through my door holding the confidence her father had handed her. He had given away permission that did not belong to him, and then, when the truth had begun to matter, he had hidden behind silence. The judge ordered the occupancy terminated and set a date for enforcement if Ashley and Tyler did not leave voluntarily. It was not theatrical. There was no gavel strike that echoed through the room. There was simply a legal conclusion entered into the record, while Ashley stood there with tears in her eyes, furious at a world that had stopped bending around what her father promised. Outside the courtroom, Mark caught up with me near the courthouse steps. "Rachel, please." The November air was cold, and people moved around us carrying folders, coffee cups, and small private disasters of their own. "I need time," he said. "You had time." I didn't understand how serious this was. I turned to him then. "You understood the night she handed me that list." His face crumpled slightly. "You understood when I looked at you and you said nothing. You understood when she called it your house. You understood when I gave them papers to sign and she tore them up. You understood every time you chose convenience over truth." He swallowed hard. "I didn't want to lose my daughter." "And you were willing to lose your wife?" He had no answer. 3 days later, Ashley and Tyler still had not packed. That was the final insult, though by then it felt almost predictable. Ashley believed consequences could still be negotiated by refusing to move. Tyler looked ashamed, but shame without action is only another kind of permission. So on a cold Friday morning, sheriff's deputies arrived with Elaine. No one shouted at first. A deputy knocked. Mark opened the door, looking like he had not slept. Ashley appeared behind him in a sweatshirt, her hair unbrushed, her confidence finally gone, but not her pride. "This is ridiculous," she said. Elaine handed a copy of the order to the deputy, then turned to Mark. "Mr. Collins," she said, her voice professional but not unkind, "you have never owned any part of this property." The sentence landed exactly where it needed to. Not on Ashley. Not on Tyler. On Mark. His shoulders dropped. Ashley's eyes filled again, but this time she did not argue immediately. She looked around the foyer, at the staircase, the framed photographs, the old wooden floor, the home she had claimed as her father's, without ever wondering whose history lived inside the walls. Tyler packed first. He carried boxes down quietly, apologizing once when he bumped the banister. Ashley stood in the guest room for nearly 20 minutes before she began folding clothes into her suitcase. Not hanging, not arranging, folding. I noticed. So did she. Near noon, she came downstairs holding the torn-looking remains of her dignity, and for the first time since she arrived, she looked at me without contempt. "I shouldn't have given you that list," she said. "No," I replied, "you shouldn't have." She glanced toward Mark, then back at me. "I thought he had already talked to you." "That would not have made the list acceptable." Her mouth trembled. I know. I believed that she did know, at least in that moment. Maybe embarrassment had taught her what kindness had not. Maybe losing had made room for humility. I did not need to decide whether she had changed forever. I only needed to decide what I would allow in my life. "I accept your apology," I said, "but you still have to leave." She nodded once, crying now, and walked out with Tyler. Mark remained in the foyer after the last suitcase crossed the threshold. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Can we fix this?" I looked past him to the open front door, where the cold air moved through my house like a cleansing breath. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but not while you still think fixing it means I forget what happened." He covered his face with one hand. "I loved you, Mark. I built a life with you, but love is not a license to give away my dignity, my labor, or my home." He nodded, and for once he did not defend himself. That was something. It was not enough. In the weeks that followed, Mark moved into a rental apartment across town. Ashley and Tyler found a small place near his new job, and months later, Tyler mailed me a handwritten note thanking me for forcing them to grow up before their marriage became nothing but blame. Ashley did not write, but she sent back my mother's blue towels, washed and folded neatly in a cardboard box. I kept them. Not because I needed towels, because sometimes closure arrives in strange forms. I stayed in the house. I repainted the guest room a soft green, turned my father's office into a brighter workspace, and started having Sunday dinners with friends who brought food without being asked and cleared plates without needing praise. For a long time, I thought revenge meant making people hurt the way they hurt you. I learned it can be something quieter. It can be refusing to carry someone else's entitlement one more day. It can be letting the law, the truth, and your own boundaries do what anger never could. Mark's betrayal was not that he loved his daughter. A father should love his daughter. His betrayal was that he used my kindness as currency, spent my silence like permission, and stood by while someone treated me like staff in a house built by my family's sacrifices. That is what I finally understood. Peace without respect is not peace. It is surrender. And I was done surrendering. If this story made you think of someone who mistook your kindness for weakness, I hope you remember this. Boundaries are not cruelty, and protecting what is yours does not make you selfish. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is not yelling, not begging, and not proving your worth to people determined to ignore it. Sometimes it is standing calmly in the truth until everyone else has no choice but to see it. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me whether you would have handled it the same way, and if you believe respect can survive after betrayal. And if you want more emotional stories about family, marriage, truth, and quiet justice, please like, subscribe, and come back for the next one.